This week, we are talking all about safety when it comes to lifting weights. Hello and welcome back to the show. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Bree Ogletree. I'm a virtual fitness trainer teaching you how to fit fitness into your unique lifestyle so that you can achieve and maintain your body goals long term. Safety is a common concern, and getting injured while lifting weights is a common fear that holds a lot of people back from lifting weights or lifting the appropriate weight selection or entering the weight room altogether. So I definitely wanted to address this on the show and hopefully ease your mind if you're struggling with some anxiety around lifting weights. You may, be hesitant because you don't want to get injured. This episode is definitely for you if you have some fear or anxiety around lifting weights. Now, I will say your fear or concern or anxieties around lifting weights are 100% valid. There was a study that came out in 2015 that studied injuries in fitness facilities, and 42% of the injuries that they looked at were a result of free weights. So it's definitely a very valid fear or anxiety or concern to have, but when lifting weights safely and appropriately, lifting weights can actually help you prevent injury. It's going to make you stronger. It's going to help you move better, which in turn is going to help prevent injury over the long term. So hopefully after this episode, you'll have more ease of mind. You'll have some tips to walk away from in order to lift safely and to help prevent injury. Before we get started, be sure to like this video and consider subscribing to my show if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast if you prefer just the audio version. It really helps my channel out, helps my show out, and it lets me know that you like educational videos just like this. So these are going to be in really no particular order. I'm just going to go right down the list of the top tips that I have for you to staying safe in the weight room. My first safety tip in the weight room or when lifting free weights is to prioritize really good form. Having really good form can be described as moving with intention, really focusing on the muscle groups that should be working in that exercise, and going lighter with an exercise if you're not feeling as comfortable with a certain exercise, and choosing a lighter weight selection to gain more confidence with a lift that you may not be as familiar with. Sometimes we just want to hurry up and get stronger, and I completely get it. I love getting stronger, but when I do a new variation of an exercise, I do definitely bring the weight down a little bit to make sure that I'm moving with the right mechanics first in order to then, pick up a heavier weight. Learning the proper movement and the proper mechanics of an exercise and moving with intention first before going for a heavier weight is going to help you groove that movement pattern a little bit better. And then you're going to set yourself up for better success in the future when you are able to pick up the heavier weight, because you're going to be able to move with proper mechanics. Moving with really good form is going to be a solid foundation for getting stronger in the future. So definitely prioritize good form before picking up a weight that you may not be as proficient in or that you may struggle to lift well. A lot of coaches tend to say that you want to have every rep look pretty much the same. So if you're noticing that you're picking up a weight and it's starting to look a little wonky, like your form is kind of breaking down a little bit, I would encourage you to scale back just a little bit and really focus on your form, and that can help you prevent injury. And that's going to lead into my next safety tip. So my next safety tip is to use the appropriate weight selection. So going back to that study that I found in injury epidemiology, 36% of those injuries actually occurred due to overexertion. So as it applies to weight training, choosing the wrong weight selection, for example, can lead to something like overexertion or a musculoskeletal injury. So yes, we want to get stronger, but we want to do it in a progressive and safe way. So we just want to make sure that we're picking up the appropriate weights for whatever exercise that you're doing. A great rule of thumb for weight selection is to choose an exercise that you can do 1 or 2 more reps above whatever your rep range is. And this may take some experimentation. You may not know exactly right away, in which case I would say just err on the side of caution and pick something on the lighter side to start with. If you do a set and you feel really great doing it, then pick up the next heavier set of weights. But ideally, you want to be able to do at least 1 to 2 more reps above what your rep range is. You wouldn't actually go to that, that number, but it's a good gauge to see if you're using an appropriate weight selection. We want to avoid ego lifting. So ego lifting is when you go and just go as hard as you can in whatever lift that you're doing, just for the sake of doing it. There's really no rhyme or reason other than feeding the ego for lifting that weight. And it's usually a weight that's probably too heavy for the set that you're doing. So if we're being smart about it and we're progressively adding weight week to week from workout to workout, you will start to see strength gains. There's no need to go in the gym and completely overexert yourself and go all out when it comes to your weight selection. So be smart about your weight selection. It will keep you in the game longer. It will keep you from getting injured, and you'll make some long-term muscle and strength gains if you do it that way. My next tip is to be smart about setting up your lifts. And what I mean by this is if you have, heavy dumbbells sitting on the floor, being smart and intentional with how you actually lift those dumbbells off the floor to start your set. Or if you are setting up a barbell, for example, being mindful about the positioning that you're in when you're carrying those plates over or loading the barbell. A lot of times there tends to be lack of intention when it comes to the setup of the actual exercise. And I think that's important too, because you can easily, tweak something in your back or just get injured just being a little mindless when it comes to lifting things from the floor or setting up your lifts. So ways that you can do this is if you are picking up like a dumbbell or a plate off the floor, just make sure you're using your legs, actually deadlift it off the floor instead of just, reaching down and grabbing it. If you're loading a barbell on a rack, for example, just make sure that barbell is balanced and it's not going to flip over to one side. So things like that, just being intentional about your setup is going to help you prevent injury as well. Also, be mindful about dropping your weights too. There really should be no reason why you're dropping your weights unless you are doing something like weightlifting, like snatch and clean and jerk. In that case, it's safer to drop the weight. But if you're doing like a dumbbell workout and you get done with your set, I see this a lot with chest press, for example. I would highly recommend avoiding dropping the weights because number one, you have the potential to damage that equipment. And there's people around you probably as well, so you don't want to injure them, of course. And then you also don't want to injure yourself throwing weight on the floor. You could easily get caught in that dumbbell and then end up tweaking something like in your shoulder or your pecs. So we want to be mindful about that as well. Again, this comes back to intention, being intentional about your movement, not just while you're doing your sets and reps, but while you're setting up and while you are finishing out that set. My next tip for you is to use collars. So collars are the clips that go on the ends of things like barbells, trap bars, easy bars, usually plate-loaded free weight exercises. Those types of bars and pieces of equipment are going to have collars that go on the ends. I highly, highly, highly recommend using collars every time you use something like a barbell or a trap bar or an easy bar. Depending on the barbell and the types of plates that you're using, those plates can easily slide off and either hurt you or hurt somebody around you. So it's a highly recommended safety measure to just put collars on. It would really suck if you were benching or squatting and plates fell off and the bar took you with it. That is definitely not a situation that I want to be in. So I highly recommend, again, using those collars. They're there for a reason. My next tip is to grab a spotter. So if you know you're going heavier that day, you know it's a weight that you're a little bit iffy about, you're trying to push yourself, but you're not sure if you're going to make it to the end of your set, I would say grab a spotter when it comes to things like squatting and benching. You always want to be on the safe side and have somebody watching you than, risk getting injured over a PR. So if you're a gym loaner like myself, I'm sure there's other people at the gym who would be more than willing to spot you. Just make sure that you're not interrupting their set. Make sure it's while they're resting or setting up for an exercise. Just make sure that you're not interrupting their workout, but just stay on the safe side. If you know it's going to be a challenging weight and you're not sure if you're going to be able to lift it, definitely grab a spotter. My next safety tip is to use equipment for what it's intended for. It's always fun to get creative with exercises and try new things, but it also can be risky depending on the type of equipment and what the exercise is. So I would say, again, be on the safe side and just use machines and equipment for what it's intended for. There's no need to go and reinvent exercises to get really great results. The basics definitely work. I promise you, you don't need to go inventing exercises or doing different variations with equipment that were not meant to do those exercises on. Now, chances are, if you have some anxiety around lifting weights, you're probably not doing these things. I just felt like I needed to mention that because there is a lot of stuff on the internet, on social media. People get really creative with the machines and the equipment in the gym, and that's great, but it's also risky as well, and it can lead to injury. So just make sure you're using the equipment the appropriate way and you should be good to go. My next tip is to decrease the range of motion if you need to. Mobility is really important for a lot of lifting exercises, especially for something like a squat. But I would say just meet yourself where you're at when it comes to mobility. So what I mean by this is if you can't squat, below parallel, if you can't get your hip crease below your knees, initially, that's completely fine. Just focus on the range of motion that you do have and work with the range of motion that you do have right now. And then, of course, you can incorporate mobility exercises and things to help improve your mobility, but don't try to force yourself into positions that you're not ready for. This is going to take some, awareness about your body and yourself. And if you're working with a coach, they can help you kind of find those limitations, but work with the mobility that you have. There's no reason to force yourself into positions when the mobility is not really there. This is going to break down your form, and it's going to, of course, increase your risk for injury. So we definitely want to avoid that. So meet yourself where you're at when it comes to your mobility. And that means decreasing the range of motion for an exercise, you're still going to get a lot of benefit out of that exercise, even if you can't do a full range of motion of that exercise. Be kind to yourself and decrease the range of motion if you need to. My next safety tip is to watch your step. Going back to that study that I found in injury epidemiology, about 12.5% of those injuries were due to tripping and falling. Being the klutz that I am myself, I have tripped and fallen so many times in the gym. But a huge part of that is just not watching what I was doing or watching where I was going. So just being mindless about where I'm moving and how I'm moving in the gym. That is a very easy fix. So I would say as soon as you're ready to step into that weight room, just move with intention the entire time you're there. So having some situational awareness, watching the floor, being intentional about how you're setting up your exercises, how you're lifting weights off the floor or off the weight rack, and then how you're coming out of those lifts or breaking down the pieces of equipment. My last safety tip is to ask for help or to ask a professional. So this can be done virtually or it can be done in person at your gym. Virtually, asking for help would look something like asking your virtual coach a question about form, how to use a certain piece of equipment, how to set something up prior to you actually going to work out. It may look something like looking at a video or studying the movements and the exercises and the setup of the exercises before you go to the gym. All those little things can help you out in preventing injury and just making sure you're set up properly for your exercises and your training. If you want someone in person, most gyms have a fitness staff on hand, and investing in a few sessions is really beneficial for you because you're going to learn a lot in those sessions. They can teach you the basics when it comes to lifting, they can teach you safety tips and just show you how things are supposed to be set up and how movements are supposed to look. And I always think that hiring a coach is really beneficial. And they're going to be there with you, so they're going to help you stay safe while you're learning to lift in those first few sessions. So personally, I think it's 100% worth the investment in your fitness and health. If you're not interested in working with a trainer, you can still ask a question about a piece of equipment. That's what they're there for. If you're not sure how to set something up, just ask them. Ask a simple question of, hey, like, am I doing this right? Is this set up correctly? I just want to make sure that so that I don't get injured. Definitely take advantage of your fitness professionals at your gym, or look for someone like a virtual trainer like me to just make sure that you are set up properly and you're executing your exercises properly. All right, that is going to be it for this week. I hope that was helpful. I hope that helped ease your mind a little bit when it comes to lifting weights if safety is a big concern for you. It really just comes down to being mindful, being intentional about your lifts, your setup, your breakdown, how you're carrying your weight, and then choosing an appropriate weight selection. Then if you're not sure, always ask for help. It's always better to be safe than to get injured. So hopefully this was helpful. If it was, again, please like this video, consider subscribing to the channel or to the show if you're listening on the podcast, and leave a comment below. Let me know a fitness or a wellness topic that you would love to learn more about. I'd love to create a video for you. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next week. Bye.